The hum of the industrial vacuum echoed off the marble floors of the Grand Empire Hotel's top level like a distant storm rolling through a quiet canyon. At this hour, just past dawn, the luxury corridors were still shrouded in a peaceful stillness, broken only by the rhythmic swish of a mop or the soft clink of glassware being cleared away. Marie Duval moved through the hushed halls like a shadow, every step measured, every motion practiced. Her hands were wrapped in latex gloves, her uniform a deep navy blue that nearly blended into the high-end carpets, but her eyes, they told a different story. There was something ancient behind them, not in age, but in knowing. A depth most guests would never guess lay behind the woman who cleaned their floors. To anyone passing by, she was just another black maid in a five-star hotel, quiet, invisible, efficient. No one knew she had once stood in front of classrooms, teaching literature in a country most guests couldn't even find on a map. No one cared that she spoke 5 languages fluently, or that she sometimes whispered poetry under her breath while scrubbing toilets. No one asked. Until one morning the phone in her apron buzzed, and the universe tilted ever so slightly. She had just finished polishing the mirrors in Suite 3203 and was pushing her cart toward the penthouse. Room 3205, a room so exclusive it had its own butler call system and private elevator access. Rumor had it a tech billionaire had checked in, the night before under an alias. Marie didn't pay much attention to who stayed where. It didn't matter if it was a millionaire or a janitor. Rooms still needed to be cleaned, sheets still needed to be changed, and nobody ever looked at the person doing the work. But then her phone vibrated again, 3 times. That was the code. Her daughter, Leah, used when something important had happened. Marie's breath caught. She ducked into the corner by the linen closet, pulled out her phone, and answered it with a soft urgency. "Hallo, Leeverd. What is er aan de hand?" The Dutch rolled off her tongue like music, smooth, warm, full of life. Her voice melted into motherly concern and affection as Leah burst into excitement on the other end. She had passed her psychology mid-term with the highest grade in class. Marie's heart surged with pride. She told her daughter how proud she was, told her to keep pushing, to believe in herself, that she could do anything, anything. In that moment, the world outside the call vanished. The hotel hallway, the penthouse, the uniform on her back. None of it mattered. It was just her and her daughter, connected by love and survival, anchored in a language that carried both their past and their future. But she didn't notice the door to 3205 had creaked open behind her. A man's voice sliced. Through the hallway, calm, curious, deep. "Excuse me, were you just speaking Dutch?" Marie turned so sharply her cleaning spray fell from the cart. She immediately straightened, the phone now hastily tucked into her apron. Her eyes locked onto a tall figure standing barefoot at the doorway. His face was partly shadowed, but his eyes, icy blue and sharply intelligent, studied her with quiet intensity. Salt and pepper stubble lined his strong jaw, and he wore a gray hoodie that looked far too ordinary for a man of his wealth. But the familiarity of his face froze Marie. She knew who he was. Peter Langston, the man whose name had appeared on headlines, in books, in whispered conversations, the tech genius who built an empire out of code and empathy, who once spent $10 million anonymously to save a struggling children's hospital in Africa. The man who never gave interviews, who disappeared for months and only reappeared to do something quietly noble and vanish again. He was standing 10 feet away and he had just heard her speaking Dutch. "I'm sorry," Marie said quickly. "I didn't mean to disturb." Peter raised a hand, gently stopping her. "No, it's fine. I'm just curious. Are you Dutch?" Marie hesitated. "No, sir. I'm from Suriname. We speak Dutch there. I was talking to my daughter. His brow lifted slightly. Suriname, South America, right?" She nodded slowly, unsure if this conversation was crossing some invisible line that could cost her the job she desperately needed. Peter stepped forward, his posture relaxed, but eyes never leaving hers. That's incredible. I haven't heard fluent Dutch since a conference in Brussels 4 years ago. Your accent, it's flawless. Marie felt heat rise in her cheeks, equal parts pride and panic. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. What's your name? He asked. Marie. Marie Duval. He smiled. The kind that didn't stretch too wide, just enough to make you wonder if you'd just been seen for the first time. He offered his hand. Peter Langston. I know, Marie replied before she could stop herself. The words escaped, like air from a balloon. Peter laughed lightly. Yeah, I guess it's hard to keep a low profile in this city. Do you have a moment? Marie blinked. A moment? To talk. Maybe over coffee? I'm not a morning person, but I'd make an exception. Marie looked down at her gloves, her cart, her badge. I'm not really supposed to... Peter's voice lowered. Then let's make it unofficial. Just two people talking. Something about the way he said it, the way his tone held no trace of entitlement or command, made her breath catch. She had spent years cleaning up after the rich and powerful. None of them had ever invited her to speak. Most never even said, thank you. Still, her body hesitated. As if sensing the weight of her pause, Peter added, You remind me of someone I once knew. Marie followed him inside. The penthouse was a blend of glass, steel, and understated luxury. A skyline of Manhattan loomed through the windows like a painting. Peter poured 2 cups of coffee without asking how she liked it. She didn't care. Her mind was spinning too fast. He handed her a cup, then walked to the balcony and gestured for her to follow. I'm sorry if this is strange, he said, but the way you were speaking, it hit me, like hearing a song from childhood. My mother spoke Dutch, too. She was a maid at a hotel not far from here back when Manhattan still had personality. Marie didn't know whether to sit or stand, to answer or stay quiet. She took a small sip of coffee and waited. She was brilliant, Peter continued. Spoke 4 languages, cooked like a Michelin chef, raised me alone after my father bailed, but nobody ever asked her what her dreams were. Nobody looked beyond the apron. Marie's chest tightened. It felt like he was speaking to a part of her soul that had long been sealed off. Carefully, she said, I used to be a teacher, Dutch literature, back in Paramaribo. Peter turned to her with slow surprise. And now you clean hotel rooms? She nodded. It was the only job I could get after immigrating. My credentials didn't carry over. I didn't have the money to go back to school. And I had a daughter to raise. Where is your husband? Marie looked away. He died in an accident. Fishing boat overturned during a storm. Leah was 6. I've been everything since. Silence fell between them, deep and wide. Not awkward, just full. Peter sipped his coffee and looked out over the skyline again, as if searching for something in the jagged outline of buildings. My mother died before I ever made my first million, he said quietly. She never got to stop working. Never. Got to retire. She deserved more than the life she had. Marie blinked, the words hitting harder than expected. I always told myself, Peter went on, that if I ever met someone like her again, someone who worked in the shadows but had a light the world refused to see, I'd make sure they were seen. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears. Peter turned toward her again. I want to help you. And your daughter. Marie stared, unsure she'd heard him correctly. I have a foundation, he said. We sponsor first-generation college students. We also fund retraining programs for adults. If you're open to it, I'd like to offer your daughter a full scholarship, books, tuition, housing. And if you want to teach again, we can make that happen too. Tears filled Marie's eyes. Before she could stop them, why? She whispered. Because no one did it for my mother, he said, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." And in that moment, on a balcony high above a city that too often forgets its quiet heroes, a maid and a billionaire stood as equals. No uniforms, no titles, just two people linked by pain, hope, and the radical idea that one act of kindness could echo louder than 1,000 fortunes. Marie didn't speak for several seconds after Peter's offer. She couldn't. Her throat had tightened with so much emotion, it was like her entire life had suddenly rushed to the surface, too heavy for words. The sounds of the city below, sirens, horns, distant conversations, faded to silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "You would really do that?" she finally asked, barely above a whisper. "For someone like me?" Peter didn't flinch. "For someone like you, Marie, the world should have already done it." Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the coffee cup. She had spent years learning to never expect anything. Not fairness, not opportunity, certainly not help. Life had taught her how to endure, not how to hope. And yet here it was, hope, walking straight into her life in the form of a man she never expected to meet. "Don't know what to say," she breathed. Peter gave her a gentle nod. "You don't have to say anything. Just tell me if you're ready." Marie's eyes stung with tears. She looked down at her worn shoes, the shoes she had worn 6 days a week for nearly 5 years. Then she thought of Leah, her bright, relentless, stubbornly optimistic daughter who had studied under street lamps when their power was cut, who had skipped meals so Marie could eat, who had never once stopped dreaming even when Marie had. "I've never been ready for anything," she said, softly. "But I keep showing up." Peter smiled. "Sometimes that's all it takes." Later that day, Marie clocked out early for the first time in years. Her supervisor didn't ask questions. The hotel had already received a quiet call from the top, something about special arrangements and foundation partnerships. Marie didn't care what anyone thought. Her world had tilted, and she needed to find her center again. She boarded the subway with trembling fingers, holding her phone like it was aflame. She could barely wait. As soon as she heard her daughter's voice, she nearly broke. "Leah, something happened today. You sound weird, Mama. Are you okay?" Marie laughed and sobbed all at once. "I'm more than okay, sweetheart. Listen, someone wants to help you, really help you. A full scholarship, everything you need." There was a pause. "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" Marie was shaking, breathless. "His name is Peter Langston. You probably know who he is. He heard me speaking to you. He asked to talk. And, Leah, he said he sees something in us, something worth investing in." The line went silent. Then came Leah's voice, small and shaking. "Mama, is this real? You're not joking?" "No, baby. I could never make up something this beautiful." She expected Leah to cry, but instead, her daughter whispered, "I knew it. I always knew something would happen. I just didn't know when." Marie sat on the edge of the train seat, heart racing, as people bustled past her. "You knew?" "I always knew you weren't meant to be invisible." That night, Marie couldn't sleep. Her tiny apartment felt different, less like a cage, more like a place she was just passing through. She pulled out the old journal she hadn't written in for years. Its pages were yellowed and the ink had smudged in some places from tears, long dried. She began to write again, her hand steady, her heart full. "Today, someone saw me." Within a week, everything changed. Leah was connected with the Langston Foundation's academic team. They handled every detail, transfer paperwork, housing, tutoring support. She was accepted into NYU's psychology program on a full ride. When she got the official letter, she ran through the apartment, waving it like a flag of freedom. As for Marie, Peter didn't forget his second promise. She was offered a spot in an accelerated educator recertification program. Classes on weekends, stipends included. It had been over a decade since she stood in a classroom, but the moment she walked into orientation, something inside her reawakened. Peter didn't hover or micromanage. He simply opened the door and let her walk through. But he kept in touch. Through check-ins, thoughtful messages, and one afternoon when he showed up to surprise her with a Dutch poetry book that was out of print. He had tracked it down from a small antique shop in The Hague. One night, months later, as autumn leaves danced in the city streets and the air hinted at the coming cold, Marie stood in the back of a lecture hall at NYU. Her daughter was on stage, giving a presentation about intergenerational trauma and resilience. She spoke with confidence, passion, and grace. She quoted Surinamese proverbs, referenced Dutch poets, and talked about her mother, the strongest person she knew. Marie's eyes blurred with tears as the crowd applauded. That applause echoed into something deeper than sound. It was validation, for the years of cleaning, for the hours of sacrifice, for the heartbreak she never let swallow her. Peter sat beside her, hands folded, silent and respectful. When it was over, Leah ran off the stage and straight into her mother's arms. "I hope I made you proud," she said, breathless. Marie smiled, her voice thick. "You made me whole." And as they embraced, Peter stepped back to give them space, but Marie reached for his hand. "You changed everything," she said. He shook his head. "No, I just noticed what was already remarkable." In the months that followed, Marie completed her certification and received multiple offers from schools eager to hire her. She chose a small charter school in the Bronx that specialized in language immersion and literature for underserved communities. Her classroom was decorated with colorful maps, Dutch poems, and a quote written in bold letters. "To be seen is the beginning of everything." Every student who sat in her class learned more than just language. They learned resilience. They learned about worlds beyond borders and labels. And above all, they learned that greatness isn't always loud. It often wears a janitor's uniform, walks quietly through hotel corridors, and speaks to their children in love-soaked whispers. And Peter? He remained a friend, not the kind who hovered, but the kind who believed. When Marie published her first children's book in both Dutch and English, based on bedtime stories she used to tell Leah, he was the first to order 1,000 copies and donate them to inner-city schools across the country. One day, as Marie walked to her classroom through a snowy courtyard, a young girl tugged at her coat. "Miss Duval," she said, "how did you become a teacher?" Marie knelt down, smiling. "Because one person believed I could be more than what the world expected." The girl grinned and ran off. Marie stood up, her heart warm against the winter chill. She had spent years in the background, her brilliance hidden behind brooms and silence. But now, her story shone in the hearts of every child she taught, in every classroom she walked into, and in every life she touched. All because she answered a call in Dutch. And someone listened. Sometimes the world doesn't need another millionaire. It just needs someone to look closer, to listen, to believe. And when that happens, when one person chooses to lift another, the ripple can turn a whisper into a legacy.